So I joined Battery back in 2000 at the last NASDAQ peak. And I can tell you, it was a very painful first few years at Battery Ventures. With NASDAQ at record highs today, you might be wondering if the software industry has peaked again. Last couple of days are interesting. Is another downturn coming? Is now the time to sell your business versus busting your ass for 5 years trying to create value? Well, the good news is, I think software's best days are still ahead, and I'd like to tell you why. So let's zoom out for a moment. Software is growing 3x GDP, and SaaS is growing close to 8x GDP. This rate compounds very quickly. Software has grown consistently during the last 40 years. Even the dot-com bust in 2001 and the Great Recession in 2008, neither had a material impact on this trajectory curve. All of this growth has been noticed by public investors and acquirers as well. In fact, in 2016, it was a record year for cloud M&A with $60 billion in transactions. Now, maybe you can't see it here in this version of it, but if you look at all prior years, we had more M&A last year than all prior years combined. Let's go back to fundamentals. Software has played a key role in doubling productivity over the last 5 decades. And the economic impact of software is massive. In the US alone, software drives over 10 million direct and indirect jobs. We worked with Peter's macroeconomics team at McKinsey and tried to quantify this impact. And here's what we came up with. Software is now driving $1.4 trillion of economic value, which equates to 8% of US GDP. On an apples and apples basis, we compared it to healthcare. Software is already at 50% of the healthcare economic impact. And if you assume the current 6.9% growth rate, software will have a $2 trillion impact to the economy by 2020. And that's, at that point, 10% of forecasted GDP. Personally, I believe software is going to be the biggest segment of the economy in our lifetimes. And I think that's a big deal. It means that we're standing in front of a historic wave, an opportunity that is just emerging. It begs the question, why is software growing? So we boiled it down to something we call the 5 forces of software's accelerating growth. I'll cover each one quickly. The first force is the most basic. With each new architecture, core workflow software is getting easier to use, easier to deploy, and impacting more and more seats. This has driven much of the growth we have enjoyed to date. However, software is finally infiltrating what I call niche markets, in quotes. In the past, software was really just about large enterprises. It basically skipped half of the economy. There were haves and have-nots. With distribution costs approaching zero, SMBs are finally benefiting from software. And the same is true for many vertical markets as well. For example, we just sold a vertical SaaS company called Brightree that built a $120 million revenue business and $50 million in EBITDA just selling to small, little home health companies, talking like 10, 20 employee type companies. Selling to this vertical was not possible in the prior generation. Software is displacing hardware. As hardware continues to commoditize, the value is accruing to the top of the stack. It's not a surprise to me that Cisco spent $3.7 billion to acquire AppDynamics. Hopefully, Jyoti will tell us how we really pulled that off the night before the IPO during cocktails tonight. Software is displacing additional labor. While full of social implications here, this is the biggest mega trend we're seeing. This is happening across many end markets. Today, the ratio of labor to software spend may be 10 to 1 in most companies. Even for the most advanced tech companies, it might be 5 to 1. But I believe by 2050, for your typical enterprise company, the dollars that they spend on software is going to equal the dollars they spend on labor. It's just a matter of time. And lastly, every company is transforming to a software or a digital company. GE is not alone in this aspirational goal. We're seeing it in our M&A activity level. We're seeing many non-traditional buyers approaching us, companies like Danaher and Roper, real industrial companies saying, hey, we got to get in on this game. Software is the future. So these 5 forces combined are driving software's growth. Looks like a pretty impressive growth line. But if you factor in just a 5% continued growth rate, which, as a reminder, is down from 6.9%, you get to a software market that's over $1 trillion by 2020 and $5 trillion by 2050. This is the massive opportunity we see coming. There you go. I can see it. Okay, so what does this mean for you? Can the modern cloud CEO just sit back and ride this wave to a $1 billion exit? Unfortunately not. Even though the market is huge, there are tons of new challenges for current CEOs. Here are some of our observations. This came up earlier today, actually. Product is now driving software sales. Phil from Marketo, who's here, he helped transition the industry from a sales-led model to a marketing-led approach. And now, folks like Raji at Sprinklr or Clark from InVision, they're really transforming this to a product-led industry. Our best companies can tell you which features in their product drive adoption, virality, and NPS scores. Imagine that. Figuring out who is a promoter versus a detractor based on the features they use in your product. That's the level that we're at. And don't get me wrong, I'm still a huge believer in salespeople and even field reps, but they can no longer sell shitty software. It just doesn't work that way. Product really matters. Network effects are even more important than before. Just being a workflow tool is not good enough. AppExchange is probably the best example. Okay, quick show of hands. How many folks in this room use Salesforce.com? Okay, vast majority, okay. All right, keep your hands up. All right, keep your hands up if you love the product. Hey, do you work for Salesforce? Okay, good. Godard works at Salesforce, yeah. Look, AppExchange is the real moat. We all know that. They've kind of locked people in, and it's effective. Network effects are important. Jeff from Telium is here. He's building a similar moat with almost 1,000 integrations pre-built day one. Whether it's data or integrations, having an architecture that embraces an ecosystem is going to be critical going forward. Speaking of architecture, folks like Amazon develop software in a continuous delivery model. Best-in-class companies are pushing production code many times a day. Are you as a CEO cultivating this capability within your organization? I would say one of the big changes from prior years is really online reviews. They really fundamentally changed the game. Whether it's Godard's company, G2, for customer reviews, or Glassdoor for employee reviews, the conversation is happening directly between customers and prospects. I'm still somewhat surprised how many CEOs choose to ignore this trend around transparency. But I really believe you have to embrace it. Out of curiosity, how many of you in this room know your Glassdoor ratings? It's only about 2/3. All right, we did some work, and the average rating in this room is actually quite good. It's a 4.2. Based on the analysis we did with Glassdoor last year, and full disclosure, I am on the board, a top 50 cloud company had at least a 4.5 star rating or 94% CEO approval. But what I find most fascinating is actually this next page. If you recall, this is apparently a leaked document from a Salesforce.com board meeting regarding acquisition targets. The first 2 rows in the document are about Glassdoor ratings. It just really highlights how Glassdoor ratings are influencing decisions way beyond just recruiting. Look, today, you need to grow fast or die slow. We highlighted this growth curve of best-in-class cloud companies back in 2015 and called it T2D3. Triple, triple, double, double, double to over 100 million in revenue. But what's really amazing is companies are doing it even faster today. Raji at Sprinklr reached this milestone in just 4 years. And research shows that over 70% of the market cap in any category will go to the winner. Working hard for 10 years and coming in second, it actually made money for venture folks in the past. It doesn't make money for venture folks. And as a founder, it's a total waste of your time. You got to really win this category. So find your wedge and exploit it. I think some good examples here are Coupa, which really changed the landscape by dropping supplier fees. They continued to compete against Ariba. Or one of our companies, Appboy, found this wedge against ExactTarget by focusing in on mobile as kind of its land and then expanding to a broader case for email as well. But ultimately, it's all about execution. First mover advantage is surprisingly overvalued. Does anybody remember a company called Gelco in the T&E category, time and expense category? Anybody? Okay, only people like me. All right. They were actually first. But ultimately, Concur won the category and sold for $8 billion. I think Gelco had a pretty mediocre exit. Let's see. In terms of execution, you might wonder, hey, what are some of the common patterns, I might notice from a venture capitalist perspective? And so I wanted to come up with a list of top 5. We don't really have time to go through all of these, but I actually wanted to spend a minute on number 4. In my mind, the shift to second level management is actually one of the riskiest points in a company's trajectory. Getting your team to focus on cultivating talent below them is really critical. Phil at Marketo, I thought, had a great best practice. He dedicated a good chunk of one board meeting every single year to basically succession planning. He asked each VP to present his or her organization and asked the question, hey, if you got hit by a bus tomorrow, who would you promote? And it was kind of a fascinating conversation. Many times you'd find out there was nobody on that team you could promote. And it got you thinking, we got to build bench strength. We got to keep building that second level. And unless you kind of force the VPs to present their organization, you don't see these issues coming. All right, with that, I'm going to summarize as this clock is ticking here. Even though NASDAQ is peaking, we believe great companies can and will be created in all markets. Software has had a great run over the years. However, with the 5 forces we discussed, we think it's just the beginning of software's accelerating growth. And I hope every company in this room will become a logo at some point on this chart. All right. With that, I want to thank you. The slides are available on cloudnewyork.com.